Hi there, this is a podcast, Shake Off Your Brains or Shake's Mind, and in the new season we have a new format. I will invite people whom you have most likely seen on YouTube and find out their personal stories. Let's figure out how they got to the point where they are today, what helped them along the way. And today, I have Alan Mamiev as a guest, a mentor and mentor of conscious life who has already trained 2,500 people. Alan is a master of out-of-body travel and lucid dreaming, one of the most famous authors in the ancestry blogosphere, and a political scientist. Alan, thank you for coming.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's agree with you a little bit right away. When we talked on the phone, I asked you, what is the correct way to call you Alan or Alan? You say how convenient. Yes, in Europe they call it that. In Russia it's different. You can Alan.
You can Alan because it is absolutely correctly considered. This is a different pronunciation of the same name. In general, Alan and Alana were our ancestors. There are more Alans in Ossetia than there are Ivanovs in Russia, do you know? In Europe, they call Alans. In France, they call Alans. It's all the same name. Why? Because these Alans moved to Europe during the Great Migration of Peoples, conquered there, created a kingdom there, some principalities, and settled there. And that name stayed there.
And you also said about aliens. What does it mean?
In English, Alan is who? These are aliens.
Magical people.
The question is from where?
Magical people. Do you call yourself a mentor of conscious life?
That's what my familiar assistants who write these texts call them.
And you?
And I just live like that. I share my experience. I prefer the concept of some kind of coach, you know, because now these are all the words of mentoring. They are somehow discredited, like the word spirituality. Yes, I don't know, love. These have become such worn-out concepts that, well, simpler coach, more modest.
How did you come?
I share my experience, rather.
Sharing.
Experience. I don't recommend anything that I don't do myself.
That's great. And how did you come to the point that is now?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, or it turns out that this spiritual path, but what is now called spiritual, consciously, it is called differently now, is usually driven by circumstances of irresistible force. Yes, here are some circumstances that develop like this. Life breaks down. Everything becomes bad. Someone there is thrown to the brink of life and death. Someone, on the contrary, is even killed, and he returns. Yes, through clinical death. It happens in different ways. But it always goes through a crisis. A certain crisis happens, and a person begins to look for a way out. They throw him a way out. You know, I don't know, some kind of innate specificity. I have been dreaming since childhood, for example. Yes, I understood that I was dreaming. In other words, my life was divided. That's how I live. I understood that there was some other life, yes, there. When I shared it with my older relatives, there with my grandmother, she said in the news, such people are called kulbads. Like, don't tell anyone, but this is the place to be. That is, you see, in our culture, as if these things are not considered to be some kind of wild or supernatural. This is so normal that my late grandmother said, not in the mountains when they lived. They only discussed dreams, but what else was there to discuss? That is, it has always been a part of life. It is somehow prescribed, and, I don't know, in some traditions. Well, part of life, you know. And there was nothing supernatural about it. And, accordingly, here it remains. Then, after childhood, in youth, these lucid dreams probably disappeared. And when these problems began, they began to open up right brightly again.
And how did they manifest themselves? And how did they help you?
But he was absolutely right. You sleep, you lie down, and you bang open your eyes. But you realize that you're somewhere, you know. And there someone comes somewhere and says, "Here, friend, you have problems there. We know there. If you don't do this, most likely in there, in 2 or 3 years, you will die altogether. Because your path is already over. Either you do it this way or in another way." And it rushed there.
That is, through dreams, you received some answers that led you.
Straight instructions, rather. Well, how to work with energy, how to work with it, how to do it there. I don't know, meditation, and what it is in general. Lucid dreaming has always helped me. What is meant by that? Here I am for another year. Well, as long as I can remember, let it be 2 years, 2 or 3 years, yes. I'm falling asleep. I've always been waiting for this moment. I don't fall asleep. Me. I'm not sleeping. 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 And I was slowly flying over my body. And then, ma'am, he got on his feet. I saw that I was lying there somewhere, sleeping, and I was walking around the apartment somewhere, or going somewhere, you know. I feel like it's a condition. Well, but it's been like that since childhood, you know. Then I started to get into different other places. I mean, I'm not sleeping, I'm not sleeping, I'm not sleeping. Bang, and you're out there somewhere in some cartoon world. Well, where's the baby, right? There was some kind of life of its own boiling from its own movement, and then they went. And it periodically returned in his youth, and that's it. but I have never used as this spiritual practice. It was just entertainment. What people do in dreams, what they can't do in their daily lives. But at the same time you fall asleep, you realize that this is a dream. You understand that you can fly there, you can, I don't know, jump there, you can, I don't know, drive an expensive car there. I don't know, communicate with beautiful ladies there, when the prostrate period began there. In different ways, everything can be done there, right? Here, such compensation is coming. Then, when all these life transformations began, this is what kind of thing. Active dreams began. I told my friend, I say, listen, I say, they fucked me up there. And he, what are you talking about anyway? I say, well, I thought that's what all people do. I swear it. He says, are you serious? I say yes. He says, are we going to be with friends today? When will we see each other in the evening? Let's ask everyone, let's run these statistics. There was no internet in those years. I say, come on. We had about 10 people gathered there in Ossetia in the evening. And him. Well, that's the story, that's the story. Well, tell me. I told him, who has such a thing? What are you? He says, talent is generally some kind of nonsense. He says, come on, he says, we'll show you to a psychiatrist. I was worried about myself. I thought maybe something was wrong with me. We had another friend who was a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist friend was also seen with him. I tell him this story. He says, I'll tell you about this whole topic. You know how. Look, 80% of people, 90 somewhere, see black and white dreams at all, do not see color dreams. Colored dreams. This is already a sign of schizophrenia. That's what you tell when you see yourself, there or something else, called binary split personality. This, in short, in general, is a terrible diagnosis. Like, that's it, Hannah. I say, are you like I'm sick? Says, no, wait. This, he says, is from the point of view of this psychiatry. Yes, as if, well, they have their own tasks to say that he is a psychiatrist himself. But as if there is still an esoteric component, yes, that it was believed that this is the entrance to other worlds. And that this is a mystical experience, and everything else, yes. And somehow he put it right in my head like that. But then I realized at that moment, I say, that is, not everyone does it like that. And he doesn't say that not everyone does this. I say, for your practice. You can probably be the second or third person from whom I hear this at all, do you understand? I think, well, that's weird. And I thought that, well, nothing is simpler. But why doesn't anything exist easier? You fall asleep, the body turns off, consciousness does not turn off. And how to catch this moment? How to catch this moment? Any meditation, any of these all things are aimed at this. There are scores there, peering at pictures, listening to colors, anything. That is, to keep your consciousness turned on. The body turns off, consciousness does not turn off. And as soon as you catch the transition at that moment, that's it, you're already somewhere. This is called lucid dreaming. That is, you are aware of where you are and what you are doing there. Everything happens in different ways. And for me, this, accordingly, was some kind of help and a source of information. That's even about Castaneda, which I told you about. I was told there in a dream, read like this, I'm here. In other words, there were no books, there was no internet in those years. It was the beginning of the 2000th, just the very first years. A bookstore, I come and there I say to a woman, listen, please give me Castaneda. She says, I have one book left. He has none at all. Which one do they have? He has a lot of books. I say, I haven't read any at all. Give me some. She says I have. She says, one left, The Art of Dreaming. I say, exactly, I need it. I take it, I read it in one day, so that you just understand. For a day, a night. I didn't sleep until I finished reading it. I started reading once, somewhere like this. Well, I don't know. But 1/3 of what is described there, I had already done by that time, you know. And I realized that this is also a practitioner writing. And I just, well, as it were, a naive Chukchi youth, understood that these were practical advice. And began to implement these recommendations, and began to dive even deeper and further and further. And then this topic became for me. And who else wrote on this topic? There are Tibetans there. Yes, there is yoga of dreams. There is, as it were, a separate current in Tibetan Buddhism there. There are 6 yogs, Naropa, so-called. There was such a yogi Naropa, who described there the way, as it were, in creating this rainbow body. And one of the, as it were, elements of the 6 paths that need to be at the end that will come to this. This is the yoga of sleep, dreams. Yes, that is, well, there are a lot of labs there. Then they began to investigate Monroe, already modern research in America. Then I started reading Soviet studies on this subject. These sleepers, I do not know who is Rogozin's colleague there, and looked on the internet when they come out of the body there, and read the information there of the enemy there were introduced into consciousness. These are all things about it too. In other words, Soviet science has also researched this whole thing very much. These are all things under investigation. There is a big sleep institute in America that explores all this. It is a practical benefit. How can this be translated into practice? In us, of course. All this is not something that is taboo, well, as if such free classes are considered. You see, we have here. We could talk about beer, you know. Or what is more useful, vodka or cognac. That was another matter. We would have had more views right away. You understand, there how meat should be fried according to a new technology. And we are dispersing some strange things. But who will master these things, which society will be able to master them? Yes, these technologies, then, in fact. Society in this new time will be on the crest of a wave. Do you understand? Waves of what, again, time. And this can be mastered to a greater or lesser extent, in my opinion, by everyone. There are just a few conditions there. The most important condition is the absence of fear, that we are not allowed to do this. We are not given fears. I, on the other hand, have a lot of practice already teaching these things. Most people block it to themselves as a child. It's a quality, you know, because he accidentally fell out of his body there. In childhood, this happens to all children, yes. And there's some babeka scared him. Oh, there you remember, as a child, there a black glove will strangle you, some kind of shadow. That's it. The little child was kind of scared, and he closed this door from his side, and doesn't get there. Here's the Monster Corporation. Cartoon instructions on how to enter lucid dreams, what to do there in such a situation. That you should not be afraid, but on the contrary, somehow laugh or something else. Yes, it's about those monsters that fear.
That a person will be given a lucid dream.
Let's imagine that a person is a biomachine, right? In fact, it is a biomachine. Hands, feet in order to walk here. There are internal organs in order to make useful elements. And what is all this for? So that the brain can move on this very planet. The brain is a biocomputer, right? Now we have computer technology, as it were, giving us the opportunity to understand the necessary images. But imagine that you are a computer, but without Wi-Fi. That is, there is also a global internet, yes, which is the universe. This is a single information field, like the internet. And you have Wi-Fi in your head, but you don't know anything about it. And you live like this. We still remember computers without Wi-Fi. Here I had a computer without Wi-Fi. A typewriter, well, you can listen to music, spin some disks. That's it. Then the internet appeared. I realized at some point, that is, when this internet connected me to this computer for the first time, yes, the Pentium 166 was so scary that it was no longer just a typewriter, that it was a kind of window into the world, a library there, I do not know, some information can be taken from obscure sources. You don't understand where you got it from. You score a question, then there's a rambler, there wasn't even Google yet, yes, there's some kind of search engine, and it gives an answer. Where does he give it out from? Our picture of the world was, it was some kind of library. Grandma is typing something there, looking for, and giving you information. And you got other information, you got communications. I saw the first chats there, right? I realized that this is a window into the world we got. This is the same window into the world. A dream is an entrance to other worlds of your consciousness. This is the connection to this internet. One of the ways. I'm not saying he's the only one. It's just that I have some kind of predisposition. But there is another way to enter into these states. But all of them in the basis have a stop of the internal dialogue. Why does a person enter into lucid dream? It establishes an internal dialogue. Chick. And the switching of consciousness happens. That is, stopping the internal dialogue. And you can enter these modes without sleep. That is, roughly speaking, you turn on your Wi-Fi in your head, which is connected to this pineal gland, yes. And it connects to the information field. You
have had through dreams.
A computer without internet has become a computer with internet.
Yeah, Alan, do you have any history when lucid dreams saved a life?
Yes, there is a story. Well, there are a lot of such stories, but there is a bright one, you know. This is one of my friends who also deals with these things. This comrade, the senior comrade, has been for many years. And he has been serving in the special forces all his life. And he says, we have this frontline intelligence, which works in the deep rear. With us, he says, it's mandatory. There were no drones before. It was always as if one or two people who own these technologies were preparing, always in a group to be, yes. Because, well, they enter the information into a dream, and, no matter how there is a war there, they use all the resources. And he says, a guy like that comes along, and the war is going on, so, well, we're on a combat operation. And he says to me, he says, had a dream. We're coming. From behind, he says, a machine gunner jumps out and kills us both. From behind, she says, he killed us. You and me. I say, listen, I understand that this is, well, some kind of reality. And we have no building, nothing. Half an hour passes, the commander calls us and says, so and so, you need such a square to move out there. There are some militants there. In general, to collect information, more than once vetoes. And in fact, he sends us there, to the area that he saw in his dream. I say, well, it's impossible to refuse to talk, it's a talent to talk. You understand, everything, a combat order. We won't say that a person saw in a dream, and that's it, we can't be. Come on. And at some point, in short, there, he says, is a wooded area, forest, bushes. Someone jumped out of the bushes with a machine gun, he says, shot at us. And so, he says, we go and this picture. He says stop. And it's like in his head, this picture, chick, reproduces what he saw in a dream. And at that moment, Alan says, I say, this has never happened from him. He does a backflip, at this moment pulls out a gun, and starts shooting. A man jumps out of the bushes, starts. That is, I gave him a machine gun for a turn, but he says, wounded him at the same time. He didn't kill him. This one jumped him, and shot him, in short, him. And then after that, well, everything, as it were, the situation was resolved. They say to him, listen, how did you flip? Jump again, he says. I have never jumped before or after. Do you understand? In other words, it is a way of obtaining information. I teach people this. I also often have dreams, correct, right? Well, look at you, housewives, what do you understand? That this is basically, in the main mass of sufferers, these are housewives. They are bored, and so they are learning somehow. Spirituality pulls. You, he says, give them machine guns. Do you understand? It's the same. It's power, it's energy. And this is actually a machine gun, a weapon. What is she going to do with this machine gun? But he says she's going to tie a bow on him, you know. She will paint a kokloma there, put it on. That's how this friend told me, and he taught these guys, as if, well, Grushnikov taught the cadets this whole topic. And he says, there's a tension, the internal dialogue stops, the basis goes, then you start working with energy. Because you can't work with the energies, with the chakras, until you have stopped the dialogue. You start working, you create these chakras as an energy field around yourself. And I explained to them that, he says, you should, as it were, create this energy field, and when, he says, you will be shot. You will not be hit. Well, it's like grandpa's a fool, you know. And you can see, he says, who trains, and someone drives a fool. Do you understand? Like he says, yes, he does nothing, but it always feels. And he says, Alan says, unlike your marathons, they also passed a marathon with him, he says. Filtering took place very quickly. Those who did nothing died. Just the first task, and that's it, there are none. And all those who did, they stayed. In other words, these skills, they were vital. You see, for people it was a combat practice. When it's like entertainment, it may not work that way, but in extreme situations, it turns on very well. You have a very sharpened intuition. You know where to go, where not to go. That is, you have the same fear. When the fear of death is chasing you, a person always feels it. When a person is being chased by death, all unnecessary thoughts fly out of his head. He begins to intuitively feel it. This is a military theme. These are military practices. Do you understand? Their consciousness switches in these martial practices. Many people go to war for this switching of consciousness. And it finally changes a person. And in humans, these modes are turned on arbitrarily. From what? From the fear of death. But these are extreme ways.
Please tell me and the audience about your marathons.
Yes. Many years ago, I got into a dream again. How does it all begin? A long story is going on. And they say, you understand, he says, soon there will be a weigh-in in your planet. I say, what kind of weighing? Well, they will decide what to do with it. Do you understand? Or he says that the old route, as it were, leaves again. It says, for 2,000 years, it will be again 4.2 or as it were, it goes to the next round of evolution. This, he says, will all depend on your collective decision. Is it a collective decision? At what level will the awareness of living beings be at this moment? This will be the sign of a decision. Because here now are those souls who have been in this system for a long time. There are no random people here now. Everyone is here now, as it were, who are the actors. And a decision will be made from each decision. And I say from what, as if the criteria will be what? What kind of feeling he will be in? In a sense of fear, hatred, love, joy. Depending on how he feels, right? That is, this is his choice. That's how he lives, and I want like this. Everything is clear, which will outweigh, but so you, in short, will continue to live. It will be accepted as a collective intention, a choice of the future. And if no matter how carefully you pass, in short, you will personally hang here, he says, for 2,500 years. You will be stuck here. I kind of don't want to. I woke up thinking what to do. It is necessary to somehow disperse these conscious people more. And I even realized that there would be a war soon. I even became firmly convinced that now they will start to escalate fears, panic, and horror. That's just it. It was all these movements that went, then the war began. You see, people need to be immersed in fear, stress, pain, so that they constantly make this destructive decision inside themselves. So that they, even the thought did not creep in that they actually live in paradise. This is a paradise planet. Everything is here. White sand, mountains, beautiful, butterflies fly. Everything is beautiful. She's perfect, and he's perfect. And man is perfect, and the planet is perfect. There are problems in the head of a person, everyone, but he is not aware of them. He believes that he is so unique, he has come to this himself, that hell is here. That's exactly what is required of them, you know. These herds are being driven into this nightmare that promises us all, do you understand? And so that this does not happen, there should be more of these conscious ones. I remember how we can contribute to the universe. So they began to make these training programs. Well, as if I started talking about these things on the internet. I'm a political scientist, you know. For me, this great stress was the first time in general to talk openly about these things. Now I'm talking more freely about how many years have already passed, because I understand what Ossetia is, a small republic. That's it, you're crazy. The roof is gone. Let's prescribe pills for him there, do something else. This was the first reaction. And now, gradually, everyone is already beginning to realize this. Do you understand?
Do both men and women come to the marathon?
Yes, mostly women. 90% female, 10% male. In general, in all these stories, this is always the case. 90% female, 10% male. Because women have more energy. They have more strength. Their intuition works better. Women have one problem, they need to structure it all in their head. That's who, if they feel that someone can structure them, that's all they are, they live in feelings, they feel. But feeling is a chaotic thing. There is a lot of energy, there are a lot of feelings, but there is no understanding. And so they are drawn with this understanding. Tin, 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 that's it, I got it. How is it? What is it? In other words, it receives empirical data, and they are not structured. You see, because they are the same. They live in feelings. And men have a much more fundamental problem. They don't have feelings, you know. They understand everything, and they try over their heads like this.
Decide.
Understand everything. And this is impossible to do, because it's a feeling. Because we feel energy with our body, that is, with our senses. You see, we have chakras, yes, and here they perceive these waves, catch the body is the receiver. And the brain only analyzes it. And a person tries to understand everything through the brain, but you can't understand it, you can feel it. And already sensory data can be turned into some kind of images.
Is that what you're learning?
Yes, how to structure the whole thing.
Class.
In the head. And accordingly, women get their understanding. Men understand that it is necessary to develop the sensual sphere. As they like to say now, it's very fashionable, emotional intelligence.
Balance.
There must be a balance, of course. And it has to be balanced in a person. He must understand that the sensory data he receives is not a reason to experience emotions. That emotions are a reaction to some external influences. That is, external influences occur. I caught the wave, it enters the hormonal system through the energy body it affects. Because all the chakras are connected with the endocrine system. Hormones are hitting the brain causes a reaction. And when you understand this causal relationship, you can turn on the stop at any moment. That is, you have caught a wave, and you need to be scared of this signal according to your habits. And you say, so, stop.
I won't.
I won't. I'm going to laugh.
Yeah.
In this one, in other words, you already choose the reaction.
Yes.
This is emotional intelligence.
I.
Do you understand? That is, you choose your reactions. When women realize that this is possible in principle, they become the happiest in the world. Why? Because they believe that their emotions are an uncontrollable thing. This chaos is tearing them apart.
Yeah.
But in fact, it is not. It's just their habitual reactions. As soon as she understands it, 1, 2, 3, she takes control of her emotional sphere, everything. This is a man starting.
Awareness.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Yes.
And men, accordingly, learn to feel.
Super. Cool.
Why? Here I recommend. Someone has boys, yes, there are children growing up there. Always ask them not only what they think, but what you feel. In other words, teach them to include this tool from the earliest. And what do you feel? And did you feel something from the teacher there from that? What is his mood, good, bad? So that he also includes the sensory sphere in his own. She was artificially beaten. It's not like we've been hammered since childhood. And they don't even ask about it. They don't even know what it is to feel at all.
Is it possible to feel at all?
Yes. And he is in a hurry to live and in a hurry to feel. Like Eugene Onegin. Here. That's it. Because stopping the internal dialogue, you're starting to feel. What are you turning on? The chatter turns off, the feeling doesn't turn on. You begin to feel the world. The first thing that comes to you, fears attack, panic attacks. To understand that this is just your reaction, that it's not so scary, something is just how you used to react. Or maybe you can laugh at this fear in the face, as they do in the cartoon Monster Corporation. Do you understand? It's the children who are being tortured. When you are scared, there is no need to be afraid. Maybe laugh. Maybe they are, on the contrary, benevolent. There are these monsters. Do you understand?
Yes. Alan, many people always have a question. How to come to the spirit, to awareness, to some such deep things. At the beginning, you said that yes, there were questions, problems, some situations that started pushing you to some new vision of life in general. It was the same with me. Some questions just pushed me to look at everything in a different way. Let's tell our viewers, after all, how did you come here? What happened? If it's possible, if it's appropriate.
Crisis. I had a social crisis, do you understand? The destruction of the world in which I lived then, plus such a loss of health was strong. That I ended up there, I don't know, hopelessly in one room there for more than 6 months, probably. Couldn't even get out. Do you understand? Problems begin. You start having problems, your world is being destroyed. Later, when I began to read all sorts of spiritual literature, this is called a push of the spirit. That is, something is happening in your life. This spirit from within begins to push you, right? And it destroys the habitual life in which you live. And in principle, by and large, everyone goes through it. And even if a person, for example, starts out of curiosity, he has such a request, here. He wants to engage in spirituality. My friends, be prepared for the fact that your world will collapse. Because the world in which you live, and in which you have this desire out of curiosity, it does not correspond to the world in which you will live when this desire is realized. And it will be associated with the loss of a circle of friends, I don't know, everything. Pictures, the whole world is collapsing, you know. You will not stop doing the activity that you have been doing. In other words, you were walking here, you came to this point. Now you want to move perpendicular to the other one. So, accordingly, you have to become different. And you will be destroyed less or more traumatically. It's all individual. That's how many times I've heard such situations, right? Everything is always individual. He takes away from a person what is most dear to him.
Yes.
Yes. Someone has a business. Someone has a relationship. Someone has health. Someone has money very often, you know. And a person has to start reassembling himself. This moment of reassembling yourself, this is the first step from which any development begins, really when it goes. Because when it's voluntary, when it's like, well, between football and beer, then it won't work.
Not really, yes.
Yes, unfortunately, this is the case.
What is energy for you?
Energy is what we are, what we live in. We are energy living in energy. That's all that's around us. Well, even now physics confirms this. Modern quantum physics asserts that no matter exists. There is only tightly compressed energy. This energy manifests as material objects, but in the basis it is still energy.
Is there a difference for you, female energy or male?
Well, these are words, these are ways of speaking. You understand this, people are always trying to explain the inexplicable to them in terms that they understand. Since we live in a dual world where there is a man, a woman, right, left, good, and evil, we begin to try to explain the inexpressible, the abstract in terms that we understand. You see, with us God is necessarily an older man with a beard, some kind of solid, gray-haired. Why? Because it's the image of a father or grandfather or something else. You see, a person cannot imagine an unimaginable universe, multidimensional, yes there, with these quantum entanglements. He can't imagine. He doesn't have enough mind. His brain is very limited. Do you understand? Three-dimensional. We live in a three-dimensional reality. We cannot imagine multidimensionality. We cannot imagine infinity. Therefore, we are trying to inexplicably make it clear. And as soon as we start explaining it, we start simplifying it. As soon as we start simplifying it, we dive into where? Into ignorance.
In your opinion, both a man and a woman can come to awareness in the same way.
And in general does not share. What does a man and a woman mean? There is a spirit. The spirit is asexual, you know. Your gender identity appeared at the time of birth. When your spirit entered your mother's womb, when the conception took place, you see, he was neither a boy nor a girl. He has already become a girl there, a boy there, and received some kind of specific, I don't know, a set of physical elements. In the form of a body, yes, an avatar of some kind. Here you have a female model, I have a male model. But at the same time, we have a spirit that is absolutely abstract.
I think so too.
So what is it about? When I talk to people, I understand the level of awareness on their questions, and accordingly, so I can answer.
And what do you globally believe in?
What do you mean I believe?
What do you believe in?
Well, what is faith?
Well, here's what for you.
What faith are we talking about?
Well, look, someone believes in God, someone believes in the Creator, someone just believes in the universe as energy, someone believes in civilizations, someone believes in demons, someone believes in angels. What kind of idea do you personally have about this world?
What is there here? A mystery, an unknowable mystery. And knowing this secret without even minimal hopes of ever knowing it is the way. The feeling of an elusive mystery is the only thing that gives the right vector, because all the other stories come from ego, you know. But this is the feeling of an elusive mystery, which is very close to curiosity. To curiosity, it gives the right direction. It gives the right mood, because it is very important to have the right mood. And depending on your mood, you tune into such waves. Well, imagine that you are, for example, a radio receiver, right? You have a pen, that's where the assemblage point is, that's yours. You can adjust this to what frequency you want to stay on right now. There you can listen to the infernal world radio, yes there, please. I drank vodka, ate pork. That is, you lowered your vibrations, you tuned in with them on the same wave. Why do all alcoholics there see the same creatures up to a certain color? They're all because they're on the same wavelength. People in a state of some kind of drug intoxication there, they also see creatures the same way, because they tune their body to a certain wave. When a person understands this and begins to consciously understand himself that he has this pen, which he can catch any wave, and he starts doing it, sets himself up for any wave, you know. And then these fears disappear, and an understanding of this appears. But this is just a small part of this vast, unknowable universe. Here I have just been in this Voljinsky Datsun, yes, in a Buddhist one. And we got such a good Lama. He gave us a tour. For 4.5 hours, we discussed these topics with him. He says, well, like me, he says, no one can stand it for more than half an hour. About faith. I say, is there faith in Buddhism? It's still the science of Buddhism more, right? He says, there is faith. I say, what do you believe in? Same question. He says, look, we have a faith based on evidence. But I say, on the evidence, it's not faith anymore. No. Look, right now there's going to be smoke, right? Can you see the smoke? But we don't see the fire, no. But we, drawing conclusions from the fact that smoke, it is born of fire. The first proof. The second proof is that the wind blows like this. The smoke goes in a column, so the source of the smoke is somewhere there. The second proof. That is, there is certain evidence from which it follows that there is fire. And the fact that there is fire is already a product of our faith. Well, theoretically, there can be smoke without fire. Well, theoretically it could be, but we believe believe that there is fire, but it is backed up by evidence. So says the Buddha taught us. And all the learned Buddhas, he says, are built on this. Accordingly, he says, why Buddhism? He says, I believe that it is possible to become a rainbow body, yes, to leave and become, as it is called, to become a Buddha. This is the rainbow body, yes, the body of light. But I do not know how to do it. But the Buddha said it was possible. And he showed the ways of achievement. And he said, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you will get this result. And so I do this result like this, in such. So 9 statements are correct. Probably the 10th is correct. Do you understand? And this is the 10th, and it is a product of faith. But there are already 9 verified ones under it. Then he says, this is the right faith. And when it's just blind faith, so they told me there, just stand like this, you know, and you will be happy. This is blind faith. And blind faith is, he says, a product of ignorance.
Yes, Buddhism is very close to me.
Yes, in this sense, I believe that the universe is an unknowable mystery. It is necessary to strive for this. I also believe that once there was nothing, and there's nothing like it, like in cycles, right? Something was born. I had this when I asked the same question. I say, what? Well, he says, do you have any questions? I say, I only have one question. And what I say is such a God. He says, you know, come on, he says, I'd rather show than tell. I say, very good. People, it turns out, are in space, can you imagine? There is nothing at all. No stars, nothing at all. This says that we are now in the space that was before creation. They will call the ocean. Right now, there will be what you call the Big Bang, what is called the first pulsation. That's what exploded, that's God. And from that very first second, all energy, all matter, and all time. Because there were 3 waves of creation. First, this wave went time. The second is that it has structured this chaos into energy, into the first. Energy has already been structured into matter in different ways, right? That is, the specified parameters have already gone. And that's what exploded itself, it says, and there is God. And in this sense, he says, in this universe, in your life, he is all this. Everything, down to the very first atom, electron, proton, everything. And so when you are looking for God, it is the most pointless activity. Simply, he says, take your eyes in the mirror and look at yourself. There you will see him. Look into the eyes of another person. You will see him. On the table, on the dog, I don't know, on everything. There is nothing that it is not. There's nothing, he says. Your universe, it's all there.
Yes.
You just can't realize it.
Yes.
You are not able to accept this state, do you understand? Because you were inspired with the idea that you are some kind of the only crown of creation, a separate, well, individualism like this.
I agree.
Yes. And so, accordingly, when you realize this, everything becomes different. But you can't realize it even from my words. I've told this story a million times, even why it happened, you know. This is death coming. Death only gives such lessons.
Yeah.
I didn't get tired at all for a day. Should have left by now. I say, what time? I'm ready. Says, no, not the time. He says they just sent it. All right. So this conversation started, you know. And this was shown. I survived it. Then I went to the mirror. It really is. Since then, I have been clearly and completely aware that all beings in this universe are the darkest demons. And the most enlightened angels, as they like to say, yes, aliens, Sirius, Orion, there are all these here. All this is a product of this first act. In Hinduism, this is called the first sound. Yes, the sound. That is, and there was a word at the beginning. The word is a vibration. The first wave started. That is, boom, like an explosion. Wave 1. Here they call the first sound Om. And like this Om is still expanding. At this time, it is expanding somewhere there on the border of the universe. How much was measured there? 17 billion miles. I don't know. There's 20, 50, God knows how many. Somewhere out of this chaos, a material universe is born. That is, the act of creation is still in progress. And we're just a little story in this whole system, you know. And at the same time, we have the potential to do the same thing ourselves, to explode and become something. Which, as a matter of fact, the Buddha in his teaching, it turns out, was talking about. You understand that human consciousness can generate the universe, having reached some level, put out of this acorn. And then bang, bang, bang. And I ask him, even then, this act of creation. I say, well, here's God. I say, can you imagine? This is some kind of consciousness. Well, it's, well, indescribable, right? We can't understand it. I say, why did it explode? He says you asked the main question. Well, why does someone, having reached such a state, do such things? In principle, here is yours, he says, made out of love, out of a sense of love for what he will do. No fear, no desire to assert myself, I don't know, somewhere, in something, but just out of love. And that's why this energy, it connects everyone at such a deep basic level. You are her guides. You become its guides. And this energy begins to manifest through you. Everything is permeated with it. Just about that. Well, it was replaced with fear.
Yes, that's my philosophy.
Yours.
Yes.
You see, we even have a philosophy. It turned out that the philosophy of Buddhism. So I discussed it with him.
And me?
I say, I have come to this myself. He says, come on. What's serious? Says. And so we discussed it with him.
I recently had the same story with Buddhism, which turns out that what I live for is Buddhism.
Yes, can you imagine? I didn't know either. That's it with him.
Is a Buddha just an awakened person at all?
Yes. And there were a lot of Buddhas.
Yes.
And there were a lot of them. That's where this Lama Idigilev is now. Yes, that's where he's sitting in a state of samadhi. You can feel the energy, of course, the most powerful. This, well, it's amazing. An enlightened master. So I say, why did he decide to make such a decision? I say, and what will be the end of this whole epic? Well, as they say, he planned to get up to turn into a rainbow body. That is, at some point, when he gains some potential there, he must become a light. That is, one piece of clothing remains.
Yeah.
This is the state of the Buddha. This, by the way, is described in Castaneda. It's called burning in the fire from the inside. It was called Merkaba by the Egyptians there, yes, when they expanded this field. In other words, it is different in different traditions. There in the East is a rainbow body, a body of light. There is fire from within. They are called differently, but the meaning is the same. In other words, you bring your consciousness to such a level that you can turn your matter into energy. Manageable. That is, there is an explosion, and this is something.
Everything is energy, therefore.
Of course. And now modern nuclear physics confirms that this is possible.
Thank God.
You see, my physicist friend says, do you know how much energy there is? He says, take, I don't know, 100 ruble bill. Blow it up, Moscow can be wiped off the face of the earth if all the energy is released, which is there at the nuclear level. Just, he says, in this piece of paper. You'll erase the whole city, he says. Get her out of there. When I asked about it, so theoretically. But we don't understand one thing, he says. Here there is a subatomic level where there is chaos simply. These particles, which are in superposition, God knows what else. Yes, this one. And then bam. At some point they are structured. Where is this transition? And that is responsible for the fact that the three substances that make up the electron, proton, neutron, everything. Positive, negative particle, negative, and neutral. Everything in the universe consists of all these three basic elements. You, the table, the cat, the wall. But why is this one, he says, these three electrons gathered in the form of a table, you in the form of a person. It's in the form of a camera. How does this happen? As soon as we understand this, we will understand how to turn one thing into another. And all these ancient stories about what they could materialize, and what Sai Baba did, yes, it will become, well, real.
I was at this woman's. Yes, it was fantastic.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
It doesn't contradict.
Nothing at all.
For today.
Of course.
That's why it's very important, as if modern research, who wants to do this, to watch and read all these stories about quantum physics, at least in a popular scientific format, right? Because it gives such useful food for the mind. There, the bow has already taken place of ancient teachings, and, accordingly, of modern knowledge. This Hadron Collider, a physicist friend of mine, was built for one thing, in order to open a portal to parallel worlds. Because they realized that these multiverse are going back and forth, and that's how to open this portal. Here the particle has already been caught, says the Higgs boson. They are building even more there now, several times more. In China they are already building. And sooner or later, they say, this technical problem will be solved. All, they say, the ancient teachings were not so frivolous. As soon as this whole science appeared, immediately updated all. Why are all states engaged in all this esoteric research of ancient, collecting all this knowledge? Because they realized that these are not fairy tales. There was a small confirmation from the point of view of Buddhism. This statement, this is correct, so all the others may well be correct too. And all these stories about the fact that there were portals, 9 worlds, Asgard, Midgard, and everything else will not be fairy tales.
It already seems to be.
No longer fairy tales of the ancient Scandinavians. There were actually some devices that could. They found some subtle place in this multiverse. This is the fabric of being thin. Well, I don't know how, less than in another place. And they put some kind of apparatus there. The Stargate was not called, or something else. In other words, science and all these things are moving there. You know, advanced.
Yes.
But everyone tells us about the Tsar Father. That's it, you know, it's a spiritual thing to be. Damn, what are people thinking? You know, I came to the conclusion. Do you know what this is based on? I get it. Because we have too much alcohol consumed.
Very.
That's our whole cinematography, our whole creative environment, this. So I realized, you know, that's who uses what. That's what James Cameron Ivas bought, right. And you can immediately see, here he is, Mira Ivasky showed, in the movie Avatar. This is a purely Ivasoknaya theme, right. And our people drink vodka. And that's why all the criminal films about bandits, prosecutors are there. Kill everyone, burn the city, you know. Who uses what? Who is at what level of consciousness? That's what I'm talking about. Therefore, it is necessary to change the level of awareness of society. And it's better to keep it like this.
Who's on what program?
Hungover. Yes.
As you say.
Either drunk or hungover. And accordingly, such products are creative. And accordingly, our culture is secondary to Western culture. Why? Because that's why the blue and everything else, it generates so. What's in music, and what's in the rest of culture? Bottoms. You see, the bottoms. At the bottom.
At the bottom.
Because you can be at the bottom, at the top, my friends. At the top of what is it? These are the frequencies that you perceive, you know. From infrared to ultraviolet. And you choose which frequency you live on. And technology, you know. It is impossible to master on a hangover consciousness.
Well, now at this time, there is no longer at all. It's too much. It's too dissonant.
Of course. This dissonance will lead to insanity, to diseases, to schizophrenia, or to loss. Maybe even there. I don't know. It can lead to state power. It is this dissonance. As strange as it may sound.
And I watched your one of the reels about oak and acorns. I just want to open it for the listeners, for the audience, because people are watching us, you know, and consciously and only at the start of the spiritual path. I just want to hear your opinion. Yes, because you understand this, and you understand it deeply. Well, in my opinion, everyone is a part of God. How to come to this?
It is impossible to come to this through the mind, but you can only realize it. And to realize it all, it goes through some kind of practice. Do you understand? It's all a transpersonal experience. You cannot understand this, in fact, banal truth through words, through philosophy, through books. Do you understand? But even here, and that's what I have to do, for example, right? I'm on the airwaves, as it were. This is for me such a training of this awareness. How does it manifest itself? That is, I enter this state. Yes, the internal dialogue turns off and the flow of thoughts. That is, there is no thought. And people start asking questions. Because in this state you have the answers, but you have no questions. It's like you know everything, but you don't have any questions. And they ask their questions, and I'm on the air and answer. There was one question there. That's how a person like this is such a poor creature. There is an image and likeness. There is God. And immediately the answer comes. And you, he says, tell your friend. There's a tree, and there's an acorn. Do you understand? Everyone says an acorn is a complete analog of a tree. Everything is laid down there. There is a program and a nutritional element. Everything is there. So that it becomes a tree like this, a 100-year-old oak. Everyone becomes. Not everyone. Why? Well, a lot of circumstances. It's not getting any better. Also, a lot is potentially inherent in a person. But in order to reveal this potential, he needs to work on himself. He is given potential. On, please, gas up. Come on, do it. But no one will do anything for him. This is his personal path and the path to no life, you know. It is many, many, many lives that a person goes to this if he has this aspiration. If this soul has no aspirations in this direction, 1, 2, 3, I don't know, there is a 20th life. But he sees that, well, he doesn't want to. Well, for recycling. Do you understand? Well, what's the point? In the universe, the task of development, you know, creation of a new, unprecedented. That a person or some kind of creature was trying to develop somewhere. And if it doesn't develop, why is it needed? Which just consumed resources.
Can you recommend maybe some practices? Or maybe once something helped you or something impressed you somehow? I don't know. For our viewers who are watching us now.
But in general, the entrance to these all things is with such a simple thing as stopping the mind. You will take any tradition, any Eastern, Western, and you will be told everywhere about stopping the internal dialogue. That is, all of these things. The entrance, as they say, the entrance says, the world of magicians begins the door. This is stopping the internal dialogue. People spend years on this. Do you understand? Because you need to learn to control your mind.
Well, what can help?
What can help?
Yes.
Only your desire and practice every day. At least just start doing this, you know how. Let's give ourselves half an hour on the day of the task, right? That's all that's going on in my head right now. It's not me.
Yeah.
And just watch what happens. You will hear hysterical discussions of something there, some quotes. You will constantly be fed some information, your brain will be fed, and you're just watching it from the sidelines. And gradually, he will shut up. Then, when he shuts up these conversations, it happens differently for everyone. There are 20 voices who can discuss at the same time. And the more educated a person is, the more books he has read, the more difficult it is for him to stop his inner dialogue. He's richer, there are more and more neural connections there, and it's getting hard for him, right? Then some kind of music starts. Some kind of moronic, hackneyed pop melody starts playing to you there. A record, yes. Some kind of group, a combination from your youth, yes, there. And that's it. And if you eventually manage to do it and you stop it, you catch this silence, then in this silence, through some threshold of it. Everyone has a different threshold. Well, in time there are 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. Bam! You'll feel like you're going to have a feeling that you're connected to some kind of internet, you know, and that you don't know, as if you know everything.
Are you doing any practices yourself now?
Of course. I don't do it. I live in them.
Which ones?
You understand? Here's the difference. Here I like this parable about the Buddha, right? Disciples come to him, to this Buddha, he meditates. They come to him, they say, "Listen, teacher, we had a fight with a friend. What are you arguing about?" "We are arguing how much meditation is needed." He says 3 hours a day. I say 5 hours a day. Who, he says, is right among us? He says, you, he says, are both wrong. Says why? Because it is necessary to make life a meditation. Do you understand? In other words, you need to constantly be in this state. When I caught this state, it probably took me 8 or 9 to go to the toilet. And do you know how? I did different practices. Meditations. Dynamic, static. Well, I don't know here. And he wrote a book. He has an orange book. He wrote all kinds of meditation there. He was such a well-read, intelligent philosopher. And he went through all the traditions of the world about these, on these topics, and described all the meditations. Yes, Sufis are like that, like they have in India. And he described everything. And in the end he wrote, if none of them suited you, then in this life, you just don't need it. Well, like I went through everything. So I went through almost all of them there and nothing worked out for me. Some time passes, and then I do another meditation. Therefore, a long time, there in the mirror, you look into your eye, yes. You stop the flow of thought there, it does not stop. And I find myself in a lucid dream already, and such a kind. He says, what are you like upset about? I say, here I have a problem. What's the problem? I can't, I say, stop the internal dialogue. And what's the problem with stopping him? I say, wow, what's the problem? I say, how long have I been suffering? Now, he says, I'll show you. Look, he says, sit down. Bam, such a chair appears, a table. Sit down, he says, put your hands like that. I sat down. And now, he says, you know that you are made of emptiness, right? Well, your quantum physics, you've read there, watched, yes, these videos are all there. You realize you're made of nothing, right? Well, you understand, yes, dear subscribers, that we consist of 90% of emptiness, right? If you increase all this there are quanta, and the distance is very large between these atoms, all the nuclei. I say, well, yes, approximately. And now, he says, imagine with your attention, as if you start flowing yourself in and find this point of emptiness inside yourself. Well, strange, as it were. Well, there I understood. Yes, such a gig. And you start to sink into yourself. And somewhere, there I found something so small there. And he says, flow in, he says, there. It's like I'm starting to flow into myself. And now, he says, wake up. Well, go do the same thing right away, keep doing it. Here, well, don't wake up your brain. I wake up just like that. I sat down in the kitchen. At the same time, bam, I reproduced. I flow into myself like this. And at some point I flow in, I feel like you fill yourself up. It feels like you're turning yourself inside out. You know, it's a strange feeling. And you stick, flow your hands on the table. At some point, you begin to feel empty space under your hands, as if there is not a table, but some kind of emptiness. And it scared me like damn. And I look at my watch, it's been about 40-45 minutes by that time. And I realized that I had experienced the state of stopping this internal dialogue, because the first sign of the state of stopping is the state of stopping the time counting. You don't know how much time has passed. 5 minutes or an hour, you have no idea. You just go in and out, and it can go away at any time, you know. So you're marrying here. This is the criterion, my friends. Therefore, when you stop the dialogue, how can you understand that you have entered the state or not entered? You have lost track of time or not. If the time count has disappeared, it means that you live in it, respectively. Yes. And that's how it became. Then I opened my eyes. It turns on, an internal matter. I learned to open my eyes slowly. There, the whole turned on again. And so I slowly learned to open my eyes. Well, I don't know, drink water, get up, walk. But it's gone there. It took a couple of months to learn how to keep the condition. Then I got behind the wheel, I think. Let me drive in this state. What will happen? Your attention is expanding so much, you have no thoughts, but it's as if the body is driving itself. You can feel the drivers from behind, from the side, everywhere. You feel all this space, but at the same time, you do not analyze it, do not comprehend it, do not criticize it. There are no thoughts at all about this. But the fool cut it there. There is nothing. It's just like you are, and that's it. But there are no thoughts at the same time, right? There are no value judgments. Yes, here is an internal dialogue. He constantly analyzes and evaluates everything. There is no evaluation, no. There is nothing at all. It's just that there is a ride that gives you pleasure right away, yes. I didn't really like driving together. I really liked it here. It has become very much such a practice. And then I started thinking further. Well, you can drive, you can walk too. I learned to walk in this state. Because what is the task? That is, at first you know how to turn it off. There, I don't know, for 10 minutes, right? There's 15 minutes of internal dialogue. Then you begin to understand that you need to increase this amount of time, therefore half an hour, for an hour. Then how to weave it into everyday life. And then there comes a time when you start tracking, not the time when you live with an internal dialogue, but how long you live without it. That is, with him on the contrary, and it is necessary to reduce this time. Do you understand? That is, to try to do everything without this inclusion, this mind. Then I started, that's when the function of live broadcasts appeared on Instagram. Just at that time. And so I put the camera on. I think, what kind of talk can I do in this state? It's interesting, right? And there are, like, people there. I don't know them, like, yes, there. You think you won't. And I turned it on. I just look through this peephole. I enter this state, and your eyes become like glass. Yes, the same. And he wrote simply, ask something, and I will tell you something. And now I remember the first time there were either 15 or 17 people on the air. I realized that this is a wonderful tool. I've been doing this for 2, 3 hours, 4, 5 hours now without stopping the broadcast. That's how I live, you know.
It's magical.
And so it is in everything. In other words, any practice like this, it should become a part of everyday life with you. And it can't be separate. You can't be apart, but your sports classes. Well, yes, by analogy, yes. A person wants to be an Olympic champion. It can't be that here he is, I don't know, devoting 2 hours a day to sports. The rest of the time, he lives like an ordinary person and becomes an Olympic champion. It doesn't happen that way. He's been reconfiguring his whole life. He does not go to discos, does not drink, does not smoke. There, I do not know. The diet is maintained, gets up in the morning, does exercises. There, life is completely sharpened for this. He throws away everything superfluous in his life. And what is all that is superfluous? Something that prevents you from achieving your goal. You have a goal, you are going to it. Everything that does not give you the opportunity to approach her, you throw out of your life. That's exactly how I live. Throw everything out of your life. That's the problem with stopping this internal dialogue. People don't fully understand, but what is it all about, right? From the point of view of spirituality there, this is understandable, we have now sorted it out. And yet, there is also physiology. From the point of view of science, this is where you have synapses in your head, and there is electricity running through these synapses in your head, and so thoughts are born. Thoughts are not sitting there on a typewriter. They are just neural connections in your head, and electricity runs through them. When I realized this scheme myself, there is such a Hasai Ali, a well-known psychologist. Yes, he is a psychotherapist, a hypnologist there. And we did the broadcast with him, frequent broadcasts. I conduct joint broadcasts. And he also says, he says, introduce a state there. He says, I introduce any person in a state of this silence. And he taught this business to the military, representatives of the special services. They recommended it to me, and that's how we met. I asked these military men, why do you need it? He says, when you find yourself in a state of mental arrest, bullets don't hit you, shrapnel doesn't hit you. So this is a definite state, right? It's like you have a bulletproof vest, some kind of energy turns on, that your machine gun shoots and misses. How does it work? Says, I'm him, I don't know. We practice, we do, it turns out. And he taught us. I'm doing ether with him. I say that here he has developed a system. The key is also called in the Soviet Union. There are different techniques for selecting all this, and explains. The meaning, he says, is what it is. That you need to make different movements with your hands and feet when you want to think about something. And there's like this to dump all your negative emotions into this movement. I'm sitting, listening to him, he talks so interestingly. Half an hour and a half tells. I say, in other words, it turns out that you take the electricity that runs around in your brain and winds up thoughts. Dump it on some simple movement. And therefore, in all traditions, monotonous work on the garden, somewhere, on something, led to a stop of the mind. He says, you took it now, he says, in 5 minutes, he told my whole secret. Says, you see, it's just electricity running around in your head. There are no thoughts. If you have it running really hard, you can get up, just, I don't know, wave your arms, your leg. That's why, he says, children shake their legs. And our parents, they say, forbid children to swing their legs. And where are they there in Israel in schools? But on the contrary, they say, swing your leg harder. Do you understand? Because when he begins to swing his leg even more, he has excess electricity from his head, and thus stops the mind. Because the body knows. And the body makes natural movements, knocking with its fingers, waving with its foot, or something else. If you have such a movement, my friends, spontaneously, just strengthen it. Swing your leg 3 or 4 times harder until you get bored. Get bored very quickly. What does that mean? This means the brain gets rid of personal electricity. And then you plunge into a state of silence. You see, this is from the point of view of physiology. What is silence? You gradually get used to it, and you start spending less energy, because 30 to 40% of our brain consumes. You get more energy, and then how to think. We have 2 ways of thinking. There are words, there are pictures. That's when you stop thinking in words, your right hemisphere turns on, you start seeing in images. And you see the image exactly as you need it. Now you have a goal. I'm giving you an example, maybe vulgar, well, how the intention works. Yes, people are now aware of the intentions there. They teach intentions. Every person does everything in his life through intentions. Intention is an abstract thing. It is so abstract that it is very difficult to talk about it. But we don't do anything without this intention. So you came here because you had the intention. You got up in the morning because you had the intention to get up. You just get out of bed in the morning, just because you have a first. Just track down this story. First, you get an image in your head that you need to get up, then the intention turns on. Only after that the body gets up. If you manage to concentrate on the intention itself at this gap and catch this mood, then you will be able to do a lot. At the expense of your consciousness, and at the expense of the power of this very intention. But to do this, you need to control what is happening in your head. This chatterbox, he does not allow this figurative sphere to turn on. And if there is no imaginative sphere, because he works with intent through images. Here the universe reacts to our thoughts, reacts, but not to words, but to pictures, to images. And so education was the sculpting of images, and now the training of the mind. There is no sculpting of images. Right hemisphere subjects were removed from education. First of all, when the Union collapsed, the education system was destroyed, removing all right hemisphere subjects from there. Music, drawing, everything right hemisphere was removed so that there would not be the synchronous work of the hemispheres, which is simply necessary for modern man.
That's just about the mind question. In some reels, you posted a small piece from the movie. In my opinion, it's called Protecting Your Life. It's just about the mind, that he worked 7% for this friend there.
Yes.
Here's how to find out how many percent of your brain works and how it can be developed at all. Man.
This story is much better. There is a movie called Lucy, directed by Luc Besson. Luc Besson generally makes very epic such philosophical films. Here's Lucy. He's got a movie just about that. About how the girl was there. Well, she was transporting psychotropic drugs, and this package was damaged inside her. And they got into her blood in a large dose. And they started turning on the brain by 7%, by 20%, and eventually by 100%. It turned into pure energy. Do you understand? These restrictions are all very strange restrictions embedded in us. We do not know the resources of our physical body. If, as it were, people doubt it, but look, there are some, I don't know, athletes doing something, or there are some Shaolin monks, right? They show the wonders of owning their body. Everyone can do it. What's in the way?
Alan, now everywhere on the internet, anywhere, that's just who hasn't already written about it, that you will work out your kind, and you will be happy. What do you think about it at all?
Imagine that there is a tree, and there is a log. Here, bury the log in the ground. It also looks like a tree, but what doesn't he have? It has no roots. He doesn't have that depth. And, accordingly, she does not have the opportunity to receive life-giving juices from the earth, yes, to receive this energy. And it's dead. And outwardly the same. Here are the Christmas trees we put up for the new year. They cut it off, put it on, you know. And it looks the same and green, and that's it. But she's dead. Everyone understands that she is dead. Here is a person who has lost touch with his family. This is such a dead tree, such a Pinocchio, you know, such a log.
Yeah.
Accordingly, there are also two stories about the breed. Here, well, as if not quite correct. There is a mouth, and there is a tribe. We had a system. It was called a kind tribal. Here in Ossetia, they know perfectly well that when you come to visit, they will not ask you not only what your last name is, that is, your father's family, last name. You will be asked whose nephew you are, what tribe you are. Do you understand? I mean, who's your mom? And it happens so often that, for example, mom's last name is cooler than dad's. Yes. And it seems like this kind was not particularly clever. Why is he so smart? Who's your mom? Well, I see. Do you understand? Such stories often happen too. That is, we eat, watch, and childbirth, the tribe. How does it work on a material level? This is the XY of the chromosome. This is the genetic memory that these ancestors who lived before you, but they passed the flash drive to you, right? Imagine how many thousands, tens of thousands of people lived there before you. And I gave you this flash drive, yes, the genetic memory I have accumulated. And so they gave it to you. This is the memory of the body, the memory of your kind and tribe, what is in your blood. And there is also a spiritual kind. Yes, that is, the kind that is connected with your spirit, which has incarnated here. These are all different things. And you and that, and the other, the third connection must, of course, be restored and maintained. These tribal people, these stories, yes, they were very strong in traditional cultures. I was in Buryatia just now. The supreme shaman Artur Sibikov invited me there. We are friends with him there. Yes, that such a strong man is. He has a center there in the city of Angarsk. And so he invited me to visit. I looked at how this culture is based on them. They support this kind of tribal connection very much. Yes, these offerings to the ancestors, this connection. They constantly feel this spiritual connection and support it in every possible way. The same thing is being done in Ossetia, right? And, unfortunately, the people there, especially the Russian people, cut down their ancestral stories very much. And when a person is cut off from his kind, he can be connected to any egregor. Do you understand? They become... Such people very easily become dependent because there is nothing to rely on. No one is standing behind them. This connection needs to be maintained. And that's why these generic practices, they actually help. But I tell you again, there is what you have in your blood, yes, mothers, or there is your tribe there, yes, or your mouth. And there is something that is still spiritual. And very often they argue with each other, like, well, something there, the body has some relatives there, and it's like separately. I say, it all works in a complex. You see, you were born into this family for a reason. You have chosen this body. You decided to be born here. Do you understand? Accordingly, this genus corresponds to you. This tribe corresponds. Yes. In other words, you needed just such a body for your task. You see, there is no need to deny anything. And accordingly, these practices that help to restore this connection, revive it, they are very useful. What was being done, for example, was officially done by our religious system here. Now we won't even call her, it's clear who we're talking about, right? They force us to turn, they draw portraits of some people on the boards, yes, and say that it's pray to them. What does it mean to pray? Pray. You give your energy there, to this person who is painted there. You don't know him, and he lived there somewhere in Israel or in Greece. God doesn't replace who's there at all, does he? Someone's photos. That is, you are draining your energy somewhere. In traditional society, they turned to their ancestors. They did not turn to amorphous, incomprehensible to someone who it is unclear where they either were or were not. Well, you don't know these people.
Yeah.
If you want to turn to someone, turn to your ancestors.
To the grandparents.
Grandmothers, grandfathers, great-grandmothers. Pro-analysis will help you with great desire, because they are with you, they have a connection. You give them your energy, remember them there, yes there, to put some of these treats. It's still energy. It's still energy, memories. In Russia, there were memorial days there 4 times a year, yes, when the ancestors were commemorated. Here in Ossetia, they still remain there, in traditional societies. And many have stopped doing this and have lost this connection with their earthly kind. Accordingly, they receive power from this kind. You see, such Ivan Nepomniachtchi. That's what they say, Ivan, who does not remember his kinship. That's what they turned into, unfortunately, the Russian people, who were switched from their clans and tribes. Switched to someone else's egregor. Do you understand? And therefore, there are a lot of problems in society. And now people are trying to intuitively not feel this problem, and are trying to revive it in every possible way.
Recommend.
You can understand, recommend some practices. My friends, practice is the only criterion of truth.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Do not think that you will make a mistake. The most important mistake is to do nothing. So try it, You will hear a response anyway. You will feel it, you know.
So, how I don't know. To start remembering your grandparents, what would you do? That's what you did when you worked it out.
When we have memorial days, here the table is set and dedicated, for example, food. Yes, they sit down there to remember. Well, we remember grandmothers there, great-grandfathers, someone else there. But when the prayer is read, you invite all your ancestors along the male-female line. Yes, over there. What we were able to put on the table there, they make a dressing gown for them. Yes, there. Well, as they dedicate food. That is, well, here it is.
A treat for the spirit.
A treat, yes.
Just remembering.
We have surnames for everyone. Here we have a holiday for each surname, when all representatives of the surname gather in the place from where they came out. Yes, there are ancestral towers, there are ancestral sanctuary places. Everyone has one there. For example, she knows, I know, yes, where our last name came from. And every year we gather there, we remember there, we sacrifice a bull there, yes, we dedicate it to our ancestors there. In other words, we all support this connection, we try.
To honor and remember your own.
And to understand that you are their representative now on earth. They will concentrate on you like the tip of a spear, and that there are tens of thousands of people, you know, behind these shoulders you have. When you feel this power, the ancestor spirits behind my back are a great force. You will feel that you are not on your own, that you are just a link in this huge chain of times happening. And then there's the spirit. It's like his kind of spiritual. That's when these twin flames say something else. There is your spirit. When you have, as it were, worked with your body, yes, there is a soul, there is a back and forth with earthly questions. There are more advanced users watching you too, right? And they begin to deny this mouth. My friends, there is no need to deny anything. It's all part of one system. It's just that you have reached a different level of awareness. You have already realized that you are a spirit in a human body. Yes, the mouth does not satisfy you so much, but your task is to fix this mouth. In other words, there are some problems there. There is something, you are here now to fix it. So that a new page starts with you. But at the same time, you have your spiritual kind, right? It's that star or nose, but firm where you came here to this planet. And naturally, you will also be drawn to such people by your spirit. Because you're from somewhere from the same place. They're called twin flames now, aren't they?
Do you believe that?
Well, I'm pretty sure of it. Why? Because from the point of view of materially, what is spirit? It's the light of some stars.
Yes.
You see, it's the light of the stars. And what stars? The sun, the star, I don't know, Orion, Sirius. They're already starting to list different things, you know.
What is the Gemini flame for you? The soul is divided into two, as they say. Or is that what it is for you?
For us, for me, the twin flame is this spirit that came out of one star.
Yeah.
Here we have walls. Here we call ourselves Iron Pastinsky. Iron is Orion's belt. Exactly, this is the belt. Here is this constellation. This is Orion. We believe that we are the highest constellation of Orion, that our spirit comes from the constellation of Orion. And then, if they do the right funeral rite, they just started doing it at random, you know. Back there goes home. That is, the house is there. Also, for example, in Egyptian mythology it was, right? That is, a person after death fell into the kingdom of Osiris. Well, have you heard, yes, this story. And where is the kingdom of Sirius located? It's not underground. It is located in the constellation of Orion. The constellation of Orion, the kingdom of Sirius. And the Sirius star pointed to the constellation Orion. That is, they are something lower, and there are 3 of these stars, this belt of Orion. That is, in that part of some outer space. According to the mythology of many peoples, they kind of came from there. I've been to Armenia. I've also talked with Armenians there, who understands these things. He says, we also believe that we are also the constellations of Orion. That is, it is in the myths of many peoples, it is stitched. But what came? Not just the body. The spirit came from there in the first place, since those stars. See, the light of those stars. That's why the stars are beckoning to us. Have you noticed that only white people are attracted by the stars? I'm not some kind kind of racist. Yes, I'm not saying anything there. Well, how many spaceships have been built in Africa? Or how much was built in the Arab East, despite the fact that they now have money just like that 4 tonsils, you know. They build themselves hotels with golden toilets, they buy cars there. They don't build spaceships. They are not drawn there. And that's fine. Their stars don't pull. And we're just being pulled by the stars here, you know. Yes, yes. Because, in fact, there are some local people here, as if they live here, this is their home. And there are those who are aliens here. Who? What is it called? Alan.
Alan.
You see, the Allens.
Alan, and in conclusion, maybe you want to say something to our viewers, listeners.
I want to say that everything in this life depends only on you, and that there is no Harry Potter who will come, wave his wand, and you will change dramatically. And the same as in sports, there are no magic powers to become an Olympic champion. You just need to work hard and passionately on yourself, believe in yourself, and this unbending intention only appears then. There are many people who want to become Olympic champions, only a few become them. Which ones? The most persistent, the most hardworking. Again, who else is lucky? You see, not every acorn becomes an oak. And in the same way, not every spirit awakens in this life. But everything, in the end, depends on the person, on nothing else. All further. And now, guys, take it and gas it up. Or not. But you need to understand the price of the question, that now there is some kind of, well, everyone understands, transition, yes. Some kind of exam is going on and everything else. What does this mean? That these souls have lived here many times before. And if they decide not to develop, and how do they accept it? By their actions. What is the criterion for making a decision? The way a person lives. If he thinks that he may not develop, there's just a consumer society there, degrade there, I don't know, somehow just get high from life. So he chose the path of undevelopment. And he didn't choose it now, he chose it a long time ago. And now he's just showing it. How? With my life. Accordingly, there is no holy place empty in this universe, and empty flowers are not needed by anyone. Therefore, many acorns are devoured by pigs. Do you understand? And don't take offense at anyone. But on the other hand, do you know what a plus this is? A person will not understand anything. It will simply disappear. It's a scary thing. I've seen the death of souls, you know. When they dissolve into the abyss, this is such a vacuum cleaner, where it is better not to fall. Therefore, it is better to develop, my friends. First of all, it is more interesting, and secondly, it is more useful. And it is impossible to do this out of fear. Out of self-love, at least do it. Save me, you know what they say. Sometimes they don't like themselves, then they don't like anyone. Therefore, learn to love yourself. And when you start loving yourself, you will stop eating anything, drinking anything, clogging your brain with anything. You will love yourself, and, accordingly, give yourself the best. Which, as a matter of fact, is what we are offering. And here you are offering, and we are offering, and many are offering now. And that time will end. This is the time when they crucify information like this. They tell you, they put candy in your mouth, just do something, swallow it. This time will end, and you will see it all. When this bifurcation point passes, after that it will all end. And then everything will go as it was before. All this will be the lot of only closed societies there, special people. Why? Because you can't throw beads in front of pigs, and you can't give shrines to dogs to abuse. And those ideas that we have today, hee ha ha, we discussed with you, in fact they are fundamental things, you know. These are the subjects of discussion of some, I don't know, people immersed in this topic. And we are trying to entertain ordinary people there through the internet. But do you understand, dear viewers, the price of this entertainment? Because before we said it, you heard it, you didn't know it. There was no demand from you. And now you will be responsible for this information yourself.
Thank you for your time.
You too.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.